So, welcome to Designing Your Press Kit. This is the first time we've taught this, and if you want the recording will show up later. I'm going to sort of trim out the embarrassing crooked glasses and the computer crash probably, but you'll get good times anyway. To give you an idea of what we're doing, I'm going to just warn you up front. I cannot see both what's going on in the chat and the slides at the same time to advance the slides. So I will be switching back and forth, but I'm not going to immediately see what's happening in chat, and there will periodically be pauses where I'm switching screens to check the chat. So if you have a question that, something must happen urgently, please speak up on the microphone because I'll hear that. Otherwise, just wait, and that section breaks, I'll check the chat. And then if you're wondering why I'm staring off into space, it's because I'm catching up on what you said. So this is the agenda for what we're going to do today. What's not mentioned on here is there's going to be an exercise at the end where we'll start working on your bios. If you want to tap out and leave ahead of the exercise, that's fine. But anybody who wants to stay and kind of give that a little bit of work with guided practice, we can do that here. And then we're just going to go ahead and get started. And we're going to open with the really basics of what's a press kit anyway. I kind of assume you have an idea of what a press kit is, and that's why you want it to come to a seminar about them. But we're just going to kind of cover all the basics anyway to make sure that we're really clear and focused on what it is we're trying to do. So the press kit is how you're going to make it easy for other people to talk about you. And that includes actually you. You are other people in this case. Doing a little bit of legwork up front will make it a lot easier later on for you to know what to say when somebody all of a sudden wants to hear you talk about yourself and your work. That's something that a lot of people will have a natural deer in the headlights response to. And this is kind of how you make sure that even if internally you are picturing a deer in the headlights, externally you sound very savvy and on the wall. So press kit just means it is your prepackaged material that you have ready to hand to anybody who wants to have information about you. You want it to cover all of the basic information they want and give them all of the little pieces of content that they're going to need in order to do it. So generally, this would be something that it sounds like there's a lot of writers in this room. Things that reviewers would want, people who might be doing press releases, people who might be setting up events for signings that feature you, people who might be wanting to feature you as a speaker. Your press kit are going to give them the bio that they want to put in the event notice and the lines that they're going to use to pitch you to their potential audience. They can say, you should be really excited about this very cool person I got to come. This is what they do. You're going to also want to include any images and graphics and things like that they want. So we'll talk about that in more detail later. But the gist is that this is the one place that people can go to get all of the details that they need. And then they don't have to go, oh, wait, I need this thing from you. And you're very organized and thoughtful and deliberate. And it all works together to create the image and the understanding of who you are as a professional, as an artist, relative to, just kind of being like, oh, I need a bio. I guess I better scribble off whatever I can think of in the next 5 minutes. So it's really, really useful if you think of the press kit that you're making as a favor that current you is doing for future you and future everyone else who is interested in you. A lot of times people feel very awkward about trying to create something that's kind of rah-rah, promote yourself. Don't think about it as you bragging or you kind of putting yourself in the center of attention. Think about it as you organizing all of the information that future other people are going to want so that you can hand it off to them really easily and it's not a struggle and they don't have to do a lot of follow-up. And that includes yourself. One question a lot of people have is, when do you need a press kit? And the answer is now. It is never too soon to have a press kit. It is possible to use a press kit as a procrastination tool, and you work on your press kit instead of doing the thing that you ought to be talking about in your press kit. But basically, if you are at any stage in your career where you have decided what you have is a career or the intention to have a career, go ahead and start your press kit. Future you will thank you. Even if you never wind up using this iteration of it, it will make it's easier to update a press kit than to create one from scratch. I recommend anytime you have a new project coming out, and what constitutes a new project coming out will sort of evolve as your career advances. Update your press kit. Just go through and be like, all right, I have a release happening. Time to go over all my press materials and make sure they're current. I recommend also having a day of the year that is your press kit update anniversary date that you'll remember. So this is kind of like with your smoke detectors where you change your batteries every time the time changes. Have a day that you just know is press kit update day. I don't recommend making it a major holiday where you're going to be stressed and trying to prepare for vacation and cook a giant meal. So like Earth Day, depending on what your day job might be, Earth Day could be really busy for you. But if it's not, Earth Day might be the day where you're like, oh, okay, Earth Day came around, it's time to update my press kit. And so it's something that makes it very easy to remember. And then you don't come back to your press kit after 3 years and go, oh, no, I may as well start from scratch. It's too out of date. This is an overview of the things that you want in your press kit. Honestly, the most important things are a good bio and contact information, because if you have that and somebody is interested, they can get a hold of you to get the other things. It's really useful if you put more than that out there, but the bio and the contact information are the core things you absolutely have to have in your press kit. So one of the things you're going to want to think about for your press kit, and this will help you decide what to put in it, is what is the goal of your press kit? Writers are going to have different needs than artists are. They're going to be targeting different people. They're going to be answering different questions. The press that they're getting are going to happen on different platforms. So Instagram is much more image focused than Twitter, which is much more, do you have a cute blurb focused, which is completely different from TikTok, which is entirely video caption focused. So you're going to want to know kind of what is it that where's most of the attention you're expecting to come from, and make sure that your press kit addresses those needs. Do you need to have a short video that people can drop into whatever it is that they are doing in order to feature you? If you know that that's something that a lot of the people who are going to be looking at you are going to want, go ahead and have that pre-made and available to them. On the other hand, if you know that mostly you're going to be appearing as an interview guest on podcasts, then you're going to want to make sure that you have short blurbs about you that work as stings or that are easy to use for a quick audio introduction. You might care less about having moving images because it's an audio format. So things like that. Be considerate about who's going to be picking it up, and make sure that you're preparing the things that will work for them. Once you have some experience, you'll get an idea of what kinds of questions you get asked a lot. So if you're selling a lot of short fiction, for example, you're going to know, everybody wants to know, what is your publication name, what is your website, what's your bio, what's your bibliography, and then you can just have all of that prepared and made easily accessible. Similarly, if you're an artist, you're going to know that people want them to your portfolio, they're going to want to know where to follow you on Insta, have all of that kind of ready and easy packaged. And then when you have an opportunity for somebody to be asking you this, even if you can't just send them a zip folder with all of it, it'll be easy for you to copy it into their email or their form or whatever it is, and you're making future use life a lot easier because you organize a little bit ahead of time. It is possible that you're going to want multiple press kits if you work in multiple formats, or if you have multiple pen names, or if you have non-overlapping careers. You might need completely unrelated press kits, or that maybe only borrow a little bit from each other. That's fine. Question a little bit, depending on what you're doing, whether you actually need to split out the press kit. But if you do, make sure that you're targeting the content in the press kit for whatever the goal is. So if you were an actor, your press kit is going to be very different from what you might, as the same person, put together for your writing. Because your writing people might care that you're an actor. That might be interesting. It might influence your writing. But they're not going to need your headshots that show off your range of ages that you can appear as and all of that, because it's completely irrelevant to your writing career. Similarly, directors and casting agents are not necessarily going to care about all of your short fiction publication credits when they are taking a look at your kit as an actor. So you will know generally kind of what people are going to want. And if you don't know, then talk to peers. Talk to people who have been in the space that you are either trying to enter into or that you feel like you're not getting traction in. Ask to see their press kits. Take a look at what they're doing, and then figure out what your version of that looks like. So that is the generic press kit section. And this is the I warned you about it section where I switch back and take a look at the chat. Hi, Gabby. Welcome. Excellent. We've got a podcaster. Hello, fellow podcaster. All right. So that is it for the overview on what even a press kit is, and that'll hopefully help you think about some of your goals for other things that you're doing. We're not going to talk about your bio. This is the thing that is pretty universal across press kits, regardless of what your goal is or where it is that you're working, you're going to need a bio. People care about you when they are showing up to ask questions about you. This is just a fact you have to deal with. So you have two primary goals with putting together a bio. The first goal is to let people know who you are. If they don't know who you are, then it's not a very effective bio. They're not going to know why they care about anything else in your press kit, and it's kind of failed at its fundamental purpose, which is to inform people. The other thing that you're really going to make sure that it includes is a way to find you and your work. So put your contact information in your press kit. Make sure it's contact information that actually works. If the contact information you're putting is a contact form on your website, make sure the contact form actually goes somewhere and that it reliably shows up in either your inbox or some other actively monitored inbox. If it's DM me on Twitter, make sure that your DMs are open and available. And if you change it so that they're not open, update your contact information to give people a different way of getting a hold of you. We'll talk. This will be something that you might want to put a little bit of thought into based on how you're distributing your press kit. I generally recommend that you have a press kit posted on your website, but you may not want to put an email address that you check all of the time in a publicly available press kit because you don't want any rando emailing you at that inbox. In that case, that might be a situation where you want to have a contact form on your website and there's a layer of filtering on it. And so we're into the make sure the contact form actually works category. I will tell you right now, as a person who has done a lot of working with writers for podcasts and run conventions and any number of other things, nothing is more like tear-inducing frustrating than having somebody you really, really want to reach out to and really, really want to include and literally no way to get a hold of them because they have no contact information that works. If you are so far into your career that actually you don't want people contacting you anyway, and they should just go through your agency representation, post that and tell us who your agency representation is so that we can get a hold of you that way. So whatever it is that you do, give us some sort of means forward and point us to whatever your firewall or your filter is. So this is the overview for what you want to do with a bio. Write it in third person. This is not an "this is who I am" bio. It's a "this is who this person is" bio. This bio is potentially getting picked up to go into a press release or a program book or an event website or anything like that. So you want to make sure that it's something that will fit in the context that is not specifically your context. So while it's really natural to, on your website, just introduce yourself and say, "Hi, I'm Jessica Eanes. I do this cool stuff. I do all of these things. I crack lots of weird jokes that nobody thinks is funny, but they laugh anyway because I'm kind of intimidating. And I'm really into tea and parrots." Like, that's a great introduction for me to post on my website. That's a terrible bio for my press kit, because if somebody drops that in somewhere else in a different context, I'm just this weirdo who's randomly talking about bad jokes and parrots. Whereas if I rephrase that in the third person, it's someone else talking about my bad jokes and parrots, and then I kind of have cover, and it's okay. You are going to want to keep the details of the bio relevant to the context that you're speaking in. So if this is your bio for you as a podcaster, work that you do in the short fiction space might be something that you want to mention just to show off that you have experience with that, and it may influence your abilities as a podcaster. But you probably don't want to go into extensive depth about your bibliography. That's just something that you're going to kind of reference as a passing mention. Whereas if you are somebody with an extensive short fiction publication history who's working on pivoting into novels or leading up to your debut, you probably want to go into a great deal of detail in your bio about your short fiction publication history, because that's extremely relevant. That shows why anybody would care about you as a novelist. So this is why knowing who the audience for your press kit is and what you're trying to do with it really matters, because that's going to change the details and what you focus on for your bio. If you are a person whose career has led you to writing resumes a lot of the things that you're going to consider for your resume, you're also going to want to think about in a similar vein for your bio. So talk about the things that are interesting about what you did. Don't just drop titles and details. Talk about what you accomplished in those spaces and make it the things that are targeted to the position that you're applying for. I don't recommend actually dropping your resume into your bio. Use it more as like an inspirational outline for how you do it. So be like, oh yes, I've done these things, and I'm going to kind of create a slight narrative arc out of that and make it feel like a progression or a build, rather than dropping actual bullet points from your resume, because generally your resume is written to be kind of machine readable and sort of very sparse, bare bones, full of keywords. And you're going to want to make it feel a little bit more engaging and accessible when it's your bio. You do, however, want to make sure that like your character as a person and your brand as a creative or as an artist kind of come through. So you'll sometimes see really great bios where you can really tell this person is a horror writer. That person does really surreal art. This person is like top notch at weird indie games. Something like that, where you can kind of really feel what their space is just from their bio, from the details that they share and how they shared them. You get their voice a little bit. So that's something that you want to have come through. You don't necessarily want to layer it on super thick. Again, you're not the weirdo talking in first person about your bad jokes and your tea obsession, but you want people to sort of feel like, hey, I actually think I want to sit down with her and kind of get into a wonky conversation about tea or something. Like that sounds like it would be fun. So you're trying to hit that intermediary space there. Here are all of a non-exhaustive list is how I phrased it for what things that you want to include in your bio. Some of these things are more important than other things. Like you definitely want to include them, even if you don't have a lot of space. The non-bold things are things where if you have more room, this is kind of how you can flush it out and take advantage of the space that you have. Nothing here is shocking given the outlines for what you want to include on the previous slide. But when it comes time for you to write your bio and you're like, I'm stumped, what do I even say here? Refer back to this. Make sure you include the bold things first, and then as needed, think about the things that are less bold. So that covers bios. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to do an exercise at the end where it's just going to be 20 minutes where you can kind of start working on your bio if you want, and I'll answer questions about that. So you'll get some time to focus on that because that's kind of the core of your press kit. But are there questions that you have right now before we proceed? I see quiet in the chat and shaking heads on the video. So
I do have a quick question.
Sure.
You emphasize specializing in different aspects, but say you're going to like Dream Foundries Con and you're giving a panel on podcasting as well as a panel on short fiction as well as a panel on XYZ. Do you just like then include that all in the bio? Is there some kind of like massive bio, or how do you know what to specialize if you are going to something that goes to multiple specialities?
I mean, in that case, you probably want to cover all of the bases so that people know all of the things to reach you out for. And so like the how far to specialize or whether you should specialize is a question you're going to want to have up front. If you're showing up at something wearing multiple hats, cover your multiple hats. This is a problem I actually run into pretty routinely because for a person who will not wear hats or gloves, must have knocked over a haberdasher at some point in my life. And so I actually, in my bio, like my current line for dealing with this is that I rifle through the pockets of dead careers. And that both covers the I've done a ton of stuff, and also I think pretty clearly communicates exactly what kind of person I am. And so, that's a good line that I have in my bio. That's not going to be appropriate for everybody, even if, they also have done a lot of dabbling in a bunch of careers. I wouldn't recommend the phrasing, gets bored easily and changes her entire life around every 6 years out of a pathological fear of going stale. That's also true, but I'm not putting that in my press kit or my bio. And I'm probably not, saying that out loud, other than as a counterexample. So you have choices in how you do that. And generally in your press kit, self-deprecating humor is more likely to fail on you than it is to succeed. And I say that as a person who adores self-deprecating humor, because as with sarcasm on the internet, etc., especially somebody who's reading through things quickly may not notice you were kidding. And you're just this weirdo who's negging yourself in your press kit, and that doesn't come off well. So go ahead and be like, the multi-talented Joanne Turner who both turns out short fiction that does this stuff and also pivots to podcasting on a dime and can do blah, 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 blah. And go ahead and roll all of that in, and just that is who you are as a full person. If you were somewhere that was more targeted, like you're doing pitches to get your own podcast show on Spotify, for example, in that case, I would be targeting it much more to focus on your podcasting experience. And I would mention the short fiction stuff as it is relevant to the pitch that you are making. So if the show that you're pitching is about being a short writer or a short story writer, then yeah, you're going to talk about your short story career a whole lot. If it's a true crime podcast, then you might want to only talk about the short story work that is perhaps relevant or interesting to true crime stuff, and otherwise just be like published writer and focus on it in that way. So that's kind of the trade-offs that you're going to want to be thinking about, is what is the whole picture that you need to present in that context. Ramona has a question in the chat about what if it's your first published work. You're just going to have a shorter bio, and that's fine. So you can still talk about who you are as a writer. You can still talk about any relevant life experience you have. So if it's your first published work and it is about vampires, and you happen to have worked in a blood bank, then you can be like Ramona Ridgewell, the blood bank worker extraordinaire who delivers exciting vampire fiction, and go from there. Phlebotomist is the word I couldn't think of when I was going to say, if you happen to be a phlebotomist who's writing about vampires, then you probably want to talk about your day job a little bit, and you can flesh that out some. Don't make up things, and don't include wildly bizarre, irrelevant things just because you don't have a lot to say. It's okay to be brief. Flash fiction is a very hot genre right now. That's because people like short and concise. So that's fine. And it's, even if you have a ton of things, you may just only feel like being brief and not want to talk about all of them. Some of my bios get really short because I'm just like, I don't care. You just need to know this one thing about me, and it's cool. Here's my website. If you care, look it up. So like sometimes that's appropriate, and it's totally fine. Like there's no shame in that. It is worse to include a bunch of really random stuff that doesn't make sense to put in there and looks like you're kind of grasping at straws than it is to be short. If you take a look at short story markets, for example, you'll find one sentence bios. So-and-so is a writer who lives in place, period. Sometimes if they're a little bit more generous, find them on Twitter at. Like, that is a bio that happens. It's probably not a bio that's going to create opportunities because there's not a lot there, but it gets the job done. And so that's kind of the bar that you are looking at, is getting the job done. And then if you want more from it, how are you going to approach that? So again, if it's your first short story and it's like, this is what I want to build my career on, talk about who you are as a writer in context of that story. we're gonna move on. If there are other questions, go ahead, drop them in the chat. I'll see them later. We're gonna move on to headshot or not. This is a conversation that I'm very interested in because I don't like posting photos of me on the internet attached to my name because I don't want to make it that easy for the AI. I am the person that Hal is going to come after later on, and so I would like him to have to figure out how to get me. You might have slightly less quirky reasons for being, headshot avoidant, but it's a question to have. So the extent to which it is necessary to have headshots varies a lot depending on your medium and where you are in your career. Writers can get away without using headshots a lot more easily than other professions can. Podcasting is a little bit of a mixed bag. If you're doing streaming, booktubing on YouTube, things like that, headshots get a little bit more expected because you're sort of the visual component, what you look like is kind of part of your brand. Writers kind of just posting a cat in their space is a little bit more understood as a thing that happens, especially genre writers. If you're leaning more literary, you're sort of expected to appear with a mug of coffee or a cigar or something. That was a joke. But so yeah, the standards are going to be a little bit different depending on what the expectations are for who you are and who you're going to be talking to. Again, if you're mostly appearing on podcasts, headshots aren't that important because nobody can hear them. Whereas if you're going to be appearing in a lot of visual media, then it matters a little bit more. If you're going to be doing a lot of in-person stuff, posting a headshot, and I'm now advancing and talking ahead of my slides. If you're going to be appearing in person on stuff, it's a good idea sometimes to post headshots because then people will recognize you. So even though I don't really like having a lot of headshots of me posted publicly, when I'm in like community spaces, like on the Dream Foundry Discord, on Codex or whatnot, I do tend to have a picture that looks like me there. So that one, those people realize that despite it being basically a robot who sprung from the earth, fully formed, like I have an actual face and body and am a real embodied creature. And so that like they, when we're at events, they have any idea how to spot me so that when I say, oh yeah, go ahead and, we'll hook up or we'll meet up at, this place and chat about thing, there's any ability for them to follow through on that organically. So that's kind of the decision I make there, is where I don't necessarily want to be randomly recognizable on the street, but I do want people who are sort of have crossed that threshold of less strangerness to kind of have any hope of spotting me. For you, depending on what your circumstances are, you might not want to ever be recognized and never want to do a headshot. And you can, in a lot of cases, roll with that a little bit. The important thing is to have an image that will be associated with you. So having a piece of artwork, having a magazine cover, having a book cover, something, because the way media works in the world right now is very visually driven. And so even if the publication or the reviewer or whoever is perfectly fine not posting any photos of you, if an article goes up without any artwork associated with it, it's going to get buried. It's just going to completely disappear into the night because just about everything optimizes for images. Social media focuses on them, search engines focus on them, and so you're really not doing you or the people who are giving you publicity any favors by denying them that. So if you are choosing to opt out of doing a headshot, make sure you have something else that will fill that need so that there's kind of a point to even interacting with you in that way. So for example, here's an obligatory image. We'll just pause here. This kitten has a top-notch, music-oriented press kit, I assure you. If you have a logo for your brand, either, if you're doing a podcast, your show has a logo. If you are an artist, you are big-time artist of masterness, your logo for that, something like that will work pretty well. And you can potentially swap that in. Worst case scenario, especially again for genre folks, pet photos will fly. We're all cat obsessed individuals. We'll always accept your obligatory kitten. By the way, for any of you where this might be your first Dream Foundry seminar, putting your pet on camera, especially if it is a cat or a bird and I'm teaching it, gets you bonus points, and you can potentially have the gold star for best student ever. So if you have a pet nearby and you have not yet shown that pet off on camera, there's an opportunity available to you to win this seminar, which is otherwise not a competition. But, you know, pet offerings, the pet tithe is an important tithe. One of the things that just keep in mind is the headshot is an opportunity for people to feel connected to you. So it's not just, I know what your face looks like, but it's I know what your bookshelf looks like because your headshot happened in front of your bookshelf. Or I know what you look like when you are well lit in dappled sunlight in a park. Or something like that, where like they feel like they know you. So this is the horror writers probably want, you know, having their headshot happen in a graveyard kind of reinforces for them that you are a person who appears in graveyards. Whereas if you are a romance writer, maybe you want to appear in a cozy coffee shop or a nightclub or something that's kind of associated with your brand as a romance writer. If you are a musician, maybe you want to appear with your keyboard. I'm just going to take that as an opportunity to go right back here. And so that people can see you at work at your instrument, literally. So this is really an opportunity to kind of further that relationship that you have with your audience and feel accessible and feel engageable and relatable and kind of build loyalty, which again can lead to opportunity where people are like, I really want to talk to this person in this format or in this other way, or hear about their upcoming project, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because I find them relatable. And there's not a headshot that's going to guarantee you future opportunities, but it's part of the overall package. It's part of the overall presentation that you make that can kind of shift the needle for you a little bit. That is the headshot section. So we're back to checking in on the chat. Oh no, there was a kitty on camera while I was looking at the slideshow and I missed it. Hello, kitty. All right, right now Joanna's winning. Oh, and there's a poodle in the background. We have a pet off between Crystal and Joanne. Everyone should, of course, pay strict attention to the important information being delivered in the seminar, but the pets are important. There's a question in the chat about, can you use something besides a headshot? Yes, potentially. So there are careers and sections of industry where you really need a headshot. So for example, again, if you're an actor, headshots are absolutely mandatory. Even sometimes if the things that you're auditioning for are voiceover work, people still want headshots from you. And like that gets a little weird. Why is it that they want headshots from you when it should be your voice? But that is just kind of a thing where if you don't include the headshot, it's like not sending a cover letter with your resume for a regular job. You're just kind of not doing the package the way that you're supposed to. For other spaces where the norms are a little bit more flexible, you can sometimes be like, my press kit is my bio and my contact information, and also the covers of the magazines that I have appeared in, or the covers of the books that I have had published. If you don't have any publication credits yet and you're just starting out, not having any images or artwork is probably more okay than it would be later on. So that might be something that you just add later on as you go. And then, so that's the question about other images. It is important to, if possible, have an image. So even if it's just you threw together a website and there's kind of a logo that you threw up on it, that you're fine with being affiliated with you, that can sometimes be useful. I have a tendency of doing the skyline of the city that I am living in, and like getting a a photo that I, is Creative Commons or otherwise available for me to use, and warping it in some fashion to make it quirky and weird like me. And then, that would be something, if I were really in a bind and didn't have an image that I wanted to use otherwise, I could potentially point at, because it would be like, hi, I'm the person who warps skylines. That's whatever. So that's something you might want to put some thought into. And again, it'll be context specific. If you, there will be a recording of this made available. There will be a delay. It'll be a week or two because I'll need to edit the video and we'll do it captioned and whatnot, but it will be posted to our YouTube channel and then just available indefinitely afterward. And the link to the slides also will be made available. So if you cannot be here the whole time, or if you came in late, you'll be able to catch up. The good news will be, because through the magic of video editing, there were some awkward broken glasses incidents, etc. You'll get to breeze right past that, and it'll look smooth and polished in a way that reality did not live up to. If you are watching the recording right now, this is hopefully the first that you've heard about the broken glasses incident. And you'll never know, because I cut it out. All right, moving on with the next section, something that is a good thing to include in your press kit: reviews, accolades, quotes, and blurbs. Do include these if you have them. You do not have them if it's your mom's opinion. It doesn't really matter how cool your mom is, and it actually probably doesn't matter even if your mom is somebody in the industry. So if you are a book writer and your mother is a book critic and she writes a glowing review of your book and it is published, I would question whether you actually want to include that, because it's still a review from your mom. And people might take it and be like, oh yeah, I know that book critic, they're great. But if they find out that it was your mom's, like, your mom probably shouldn't have published a review about you anyway, because that's a conflict of interest. And people might feel a little burned if they get excited about you based on it being your mom's review and they didn't know it. I have definitely seen people who've jokingly put my mom thinks I'm awesome in there. That's less funny than you think it is, largely because it's a thing that tons of people have done before. So it's actually kind of stale. Even if you came up with it all by yourself, warning, lots of people have come up with that all by themselves. So it's okay to just not have this section in your press kit if you don't have anything to put in it. Keep it in mind, and as these things come in, don't just skim past them and let them go. Drop them in your press kit. So reviews from respected venues, from critics, blurbs that you get from people who are notable in the industry, any award nominations you get. Do keep in mind not all awards are created equal. So being nominated for a Pulitzer Prize is a much bigger deal than being nominated for your elementary school writing contest. Your elementary school writing test is really cool when you're in middle school. It may even be really cool when you're in high school. It's probably not cool after that. And so that's another place where context matters. So if you are pitching inside genre spaces, being nominated for a Hugo is a really, really big deal. You're going to have to make a little bit more of an argument for a Hugo outside genre spaces. It's still a big deal. It still matters, but people are not going to care about the Hugo nearly as much as they care about the Pulitzer in lit fic or journalistic spaces, for example. So that always kind of context matters, and be thoughtful about that, and make sure that the things that you are including as your accolades and your blurbs are actually kind of relevant in that space. I already covered that bit. I do want to pause and say, look, reading reviews of your own stuff, depending on who you are, can be a really bad time. I actually kind of like reading bad reviews about me, but I mentioned earlier I'm a little weird. This is not something that you should do if it's not a good time for you, and it can really be a very bad time. What you want is to have things that you can share with other people to give them a way to understand and encapsulate why they might like you, and make it easy for them to tell other people why they like you. And so it's much easier for me to say, hey, you're going to like writer so-and-so A, because as the person I'm talking to knows B said, they are awesome sauce. And then it's not just me telling some random person that they'll like you because I like you. It's me telling them that they will like you because I like you, and also random person B likes you. And so like make that easy for me. Go ahead and have friends go through reviews, like read Publishers Weekly for you, read Locus for you, whatever it is, and just hand you the pull quotes that you want. If that's going to be better for you than you reading all of the stuff and kind of fixating. It's very common for artists to see reviews or conversations about their work and only hone in on the criticism or the negative stuff, and that to become a very toxic spiral. Don't do that. Even when you're at the I need to make a press kit and have information from this, don't do that. Find a way to farm that out. Have your agent do it for you. Have your friend do it for you. This is a great place to recruit your mom if she's sad that her review of your work didn't work. Whatever. Find a way to do that doesn't expose you to stuff that's gonna like kind of get in the way of your actual work and what you need to be doing. The point here isn't for you to get feedback on your work. It's for you to make it easy for somebody else to talk about why you're cool. So don't let this become something that derails your work. You're just trying to help people talk about why you're awesome. So there's a comment in the chat suggesting that you filter only for 5-star reviews. Not necessarily. You can, depending on the place and depending on the culture, the reviewing culture in that place. So you're probably not going to be pulling quotes from like random readers, because random readers only have so much cachet. Like any given person is only going to care so much about a random reader. So if you are telling me there might be a really great line that you want to use in there that really captures what it is that you were going for, and maybe in that case. But what you're going to be looking for to put in your press kit is going to be more something like, this happened in Locus, or this was published in Strange Horizons, or this is what Charles Pager said in Quick Sips, something like that. And do just sort of keep in mind, not all reviewers are created equal. And so people who are going to care about Quick Sips may not even know about any particular booktuber who's awesome. People in the booktube space may not have ever heard of Quick Sips. And so maybe you want to pull both for your press kit. Maybe depending on who the press kit is oriented on, you want to focus on one or the other of them. So there is a little bit of legwork for you in terms of knowing who the various venues and the various reviewers are and what their standing is in context with each other in terms of who's going to care. So if it's you're trying to get a speaking gig at an elementary school, they may not know anything about genre anything. And so they may not know the difference between Locus and Quick Sips and Goodreads reviewer number 12. Maybe they will. Don't underestimate elementary school teachers, and definitely don't underestimate elementary school librarians. Librarians are badasses who will come for you. They will do it very gently and with references, but they know their stuff. So like, don't disrespect your audience, but also keep in mind that your audience, while being very competent, may not have all of the specific context relevant to you, and you need to help them out a little bit. So in that case, you know that Locus and Quick Sips are respected places, and that Goodreads reviewer number 12 is just that. So again, if Goodreads reviewer number 12, has a line where they're like, this author did XYZ things that are exactly what you are after, then maybe you want to say, as readers have mentioned, I do, XYZ things that whatever. But frame it in that case, it's a reader. Like, this is an audience, this is a general audience response. And sometimes you will get lines like that in reviews that are 3 or 4 stars, because depending on the reviewer, they may have actually put some thought into it. And they may have given you 3 or 4 stars because the thing that you did really, really well, they just don't like. And so it might be, this was not my cup of tea, but they really nailed this thing. There's another question in here about, do you have to have their permission to post their review? If you're actually posting the whole review, absolutely. Copyright applies to reviews the same as anything else. And similarly, if you are just quoting the review, you kind of get into the fair use space. if you're going to be using a quote or something for a blurb, for somewhere that wasn't necessarily expecting to be blurbed, it's good form to say, hey, do you mind? Because they might mind. And they also might object to how you want to pull the quote. So you might be like, yes, you had this line in your review that really captured what I want it to do. And they might be like, yeah, but I think the last paragraph where I totally savaged you is the one that people should pay attention to. And I really don't want you pulling things out. And so like, that's just good form. If it's something like Publishers Weekly or Locus or something that is a review venue that is expecting to be used for blurbs, and you are quoting sincerely and correctly, and you're not just cherry picking to force it to look like something that they didn't actually say, then the need to get permission is a little bit less because the expectations are a little bit different. So this is one of those professionals who are doing this all the time are going to have a different understanding of norms from people who are random readers or consumers on the internet, and keep that power difference in mind and be a good person about it. Like, be a decent human. Communicate with people who might not understand what expectations might be, and you as the person who is more professional in that capacity kind of have the onus for that and the responsibility there. Anything else? Cool. We're going to move forward to my favorite part because it has Ipa charts. So pronunciation guides are something that a lot of press kits don't include and honestly should. So we're going to start that trend right now by telling you to go ahead and do it. Audio is so important. And if they're interviewing you, just getting your name right up front is really handy. Honestly, even if your name is John Doe or whatever your local equivalent of John Doe is, go ahead and explicitly state that your name is pronounced as John Doe. Because I can tell you from personal experience, as someone who's worked on a podcast, I asked John Doe how to say his name, just in case there was an umlaut in the history of this pronunciation that is not rendered anymore, but has lingered in their pronunciation. And because I don't want to say John Doe as John Doe, just because the umlaut got lost. So go ahead and affirmatively confirm for me what your name pronunciation is, and then I don't have to wonder or ask. And that's really helpful to me. And again, this press kit is about making things easier on the people that you're going to be working with. There are roughly 4 different ways that you can provide a pronunciation guide. This is definitely not an exhaustive list, but these are the 4 things that we're going to talk about here. I kind of recommend that you do a combination of things, but I'm going to cover each of these in a little bit of detail. So 2 written formats, 2 audio formats. I don't know why I specified phonetic because they're both phonetic for the written, but formal versus colloquial. And then audio that you explicitly created to be a pronunciation guide versus audio that is kind of a reference for how it sounds in context. So we're going to go into these a little bit and kind of talk about how to make these work. And we're going to start with the formal. This is where you find out that my academic training is in linguistics and that I get kind of weirdly nerdy about phonetics. International Phonetic Alphabet is the official, I'm going to put that in quotes because this breaks down a lot depending on language families and regions that you're working in. But this is the officially objective way that you can render all sounds produced by humans, and it's fairly universal. It is a really handy tool to have for talking to people who are not necessarily going to share language or accent or be able to hear each other, but need to get a really kind of standardized, consistent idea of what the sounds are supposed to be. So this is a chart of the IPA symbols for all sounds in English. So this is a handy reference that'll cover a lot of ground for you. I included this here because it's got the handy example of words that the sound appears in, so you can have a very specific idea of what that's going to sound like in context. This chart, however, is my happy place. This is the entire IPA alphabet, basically. And they don't have English reference words. What they do is they break out all the sounds based on the physical characteristics of the sound. And so this is a lot of jargon if you are not familiar with phonetics. And I'm not going to go into the details on this because this is not a phonetics course. But I would urge you, if you are a person who has the slightest weakness for this kind of nerdery, to go ahead and get into it. Because across the top here is the sort of the physical space in your mouth and throat where the sound comes from. And on this side down here is like the quality of the sound, the nature of how it works, like the physical mechanism for how you produce it. And then clicks are kind of my favorite category over here. And then this is the vowel chart. I have included the link to this chart down here in the corner so that you can go play with it. If you go to that link, you can actually pull out each segment of this chart and then click on the various symbols, and they will tell you, like, you can hear what the sound for each of these is. So this is a deep rabbit hole that you can go down, and I encourage you to go ahead and play with it because it's a fun time. But I also acknowledge that this is kind of specialized knowledge, and if literally the only time you're ever going to use it is to put your name in a press kit, that may not be the best use of your time. And also, I'm going to acknowledge that just because you can render the pronunciation for your name in IPA does not mean that any random person who comes across it actually knows how to read that. So this is very useful, but it is not universally a solution to the how to pronounce your name question. This is where colloquial phonetic renderings can be handy. They are going to be less objective. They're going to be more prone to break down if people have differences in accent or sort of phonetic expectations, because the assumptions that you make about how they will interpret something will vary. But it might be more accessible. You might be the rendering that you give may be more actually accurate, and the understanding that people come away with may be more closely representative to what's going on than if everybody is kind of squinting at some external academic system that they're not actually very comfortable in. So if you're going to do a colloquial rendering, here are the things that I recommend that you focus on rendering in that colloquial rendering. I wonder how many times I can say rendering in a sentence. Anybody want to take a bet? So go ahead and focus on the syllable breaks, the stress, and give sounds like or rhymes with kinds of renderings for it to make it really kind of unambiguous and straightforward. So syllable breaks would be, any multisyllabic word, just go ahead and put hyphens in those spaces so people know whether or not these letters that are in it run together into a diphthong, or if there's a boundary there and they're going to do it differently. Stress, if you don't know what stress is when you're producing sounds in words, you're going to have different syllables in words that are going to kind of get more focus in how you pronounce them, and others that will sort of be de-emphasized. So the ones that have that focus might have the vowels that are held a little bit longer or get emphasized. Put those in all caps and leave the unstressed syllables in lowercase, and then it's a very easy visual marker for this is where I put my stress. And people, even if they're not consciously thinking about it, often will kind of lean more correctly on that because the all caps will cue them for it. And then having the sounds like or the rhymes with renderings nearby kind of helps them be like, oh yes, this is how I kind of have wrapped my head around it, and I can do it in that way. So for example, my pen name, I was not kind to anybody who ever wanted to pronounce it. That wasn't thought through super well. So I'm constantly having to explain how to pronounce my pen name, which is Anala. And so the IPA rendering right here is obviously it's Anala. You would take one look at that and you would know that obviously. No, a lot of people don't get it even then, in part because this doesn't really follow actual Greek phonology super well. The way that I pronounce it doesn't, that is. I was not trained in classics. The colloquial rendering I give people, I get a lot more mileage out of, which is I just lay rhymes with day. And in this case, the rhymes with day helps more with when you're not in person, when you're on the phone, when you're on a video call, and they're not entirely sure they heard what they heard. And so this kind of gets it through pretty easily. Both of these things are useful. You will probably notice that even though, again, my academic background is in linguistics and I am really comfortable with IPA, I very rarely actually fork over the IPA pronunciation. I am way more likely to do the colloquial one, because I don't see you only get so many panic blank-eyed responses from people before you move along. That's a choice that I make because I would rather people mispronounce my name than like be panicked and obsessing over whether or not they read the IPA correctly. That is not necessarily the decision that you're going to make, because that may not necessarily be your comfort level. You may think that it's really important that actually people get this right. And so it may matter more for you to hand over the IPA in that case. So that's a personal decision. I'm not going to say that one or the other is right. I am going to say, please do include something in your press kit so that people have a means to try and engage with this and get it right. In terms of creating audio guides, this is something that you may not have the capacity to do. You just may not be able to get a good recording. Even if you got a good recording, you might not have a good way to distribute it. That's fine. This is why we're covering written and audio. If you, however, you are creating an audio guide that is meant to be the explicit, this is me teaching you how to pronounce it, here are things that would be really helpful for most people if you did them. Include multiple repetitions. Go ahead and do it at a normal speed and slowed down. So that would be something like saying, my name is pronounced Anea. That's Anea Lay. And so they can kind of hear what it ought to sound like when they've got it right, but also it's slowed down so that they have the ability to kind of pick out exactly the mechanics of what's going on in that case. If you happen to know that there's the people who are going to be hearing this or who are going to be receiving it have an accent or expectations around phonology that are always going to lead them into a predictable wrong direction, you may also want to include a repetition that over-exaggerates the ways in which the corrective that you want to do in that case. So I am originally from Virginia. There is a Southern twang that is native to my speech that doesn't show up consistently or very often. If I were speaking to, I actually went through this with a grandmother where I had to explain that it was not... there was no twang in the middle vowel there. And so I would be nay, lay. And I would kind of take the pitch lower and make it a little bit more nasal to kind of counteract the inclination to stretch it out and high pitch it. And so that's going to be a little bit of audience targeting that you might know that you need to do. It's also useful if you go ahead and you put it in a sentence. So Nea Lay is the former podcast editor for Strange Horizons. And that makes it a little bit easier to see how exactly it's supposed to sound when it's not just me practicing it out loud. And then the person who's going to have to pronounce your name isn't stuck doing kind of like the robot insert thing where they get to the sentence and they get to the part where they pause for your name and then they spit out the thing that they practiced doing and then they resume the sentence and it's very awkward. So that gives them a little bit of an audio cue that makes it easier for them to integrate that naturally. And then if you are an absolute charmed individual who is just a hero when you make this guide, between each of these repetitions, you leave enough space for the person who's going to be listening to go ahead and repeat what you just did. The repeating is really useful for them to just practice the mechanics of exactly what their mouth is supposed to do and in what order. And if they're not constantly having to also mash the pause and play button in order to do that practicing, then the whole learning experience, the stress levels are slightly reduced, and you have been a very generous pronunciation guide creator. The other thing that you can do, especially if you don't have the ability to make a recording yourself, is just point them to correct audio that's just kind of in context. So I have definitely done a lot of, if you want to know how to pronounce my name, you can hear me saying at the beginning of the Strange Horizons podcast, and point them in that way. And so they'll hear me saying it. it saves me having to make a specific audio guide. In that case, it's really useful if you can give them a timestamp or a really clear indication for how to hone in on it. It's also really useful if it's the kind of situation where they can hear it referenced multiple times. So if somebody interviewed you, for example, and ahead of the interview, they introduce you and they mention your name a couple of times in doing the introduction, that would be a really good piece of audio, assuming they pronounced your name correctly, to point somebody to and just give them the timestamp for where your name starts getting dropped a whole bunch, or even timestamps for each specific name drop. And then they can skip around and kind of hear what it sounds like organically. It can also be really, really useful if you have more than 2 voices that you can send, especially if those voices are significantly different in pitching or pacing, or even if they're coming from different accents, just so that they can hear the contrast and get an idea of the range for how it's supposed to sound like. So depending on your experience, you might be used to seeing audiograms of speech. And you may have fallen into the trap while language learning of trying to make the audiogram look identical to the recorded one, which doesn't work because different voices have different features that will always warp that audiogram so that they don't line up exactly. And unless you kind of know to look for, oh, that's where the plosive is, that's where the stops are, et cetera. Like that's where the audiogram is useful. That very nature that kind of makes it impossible to identically replicate the audiogram that you've seen are why having multiple voices is useful, because that creates a range for this is the space that is correct. Because deep secret from linguistics, you're never actually rendering, like 2 different people are not actually rendering things literally the same way. Our brains just correct things that are close enough into being the thing that we expect it to hear. And so that helps people kind of wrap their heads around what is that acceptable space that will get corrected to the right thing. And then finally, I'm just going to point everybody to forvo.com. If you are not familiar with this website, it's basically just a giant dictionary of people saying things and pronouncing things. And so if you don't have any audio that you either can create for yourself or point somebody to that has been created, worst case scenario, forvo.com, and it's not even necessarily a worst case, but they might have the audio references that you want to point somebody to. This is also useful if in your press kit, for example, there's an important location name or street name or something that people may want to be pronouncing in talking about you or introducing you. Going ahead and including those references can be super handy. If you are from New Orleans, for example, there are going to be tons of names that locals know absolutely are pronounced a certain way, and people who are not local are going to butcher. And so forvo.com might be a great place to point them to, please do not pronounce this street as if it's French. It's not, it's Louisianan. And that has French influence, but is not the same. And that's going to end poorly for you. And you're going to look like somebody who doesn't know the local areas. So that can be a really good resource so that you don't have to record absolutely everything yourself. The other tip for finding good guides on pronunciation is checking local news. So if there was a parade going down the street that nobody who isn't from your town can ever pronounce correctly, and there was local news coverage of it, they're going to say the name of that street a couple of times, and you can just point them to that news article and be like, say it like they do here, because the local news is almost certainly going to get it right. And they're going to get it right in an accent and inflection that is TV friendly and therefore kind of generically accessible to people. So that's a pretty good way to get an extra audio resource that you don't have to generate yourself. And that is it for the content before the exercise. So I'm going to pause here for questions. And I'm going to catch up on the chat. So there's a question about how long should the quote section be and what would you call that section? I would go ahead and call that section like blurbs or reviews or praise. You'll see different things. The exact heading that you want to do will depend a little bit on your brand and your character. So depending on my mood, if I were going to compile one, I might say something, because I tend to lean dry and sarcastic. So mine might be, people say nice stuff. and then put things in there. That's not always going to be appropriate. You might just want to go for like the very general, what people say, or just blurbs. How long it's going to be should depend a little bit on where you are in your career. So the more work that you have out there, the more things that you have done, the longer it is going to be. You probably don't want 10 pages of blurbs for your one short story publication. But if you have written 50 novels and 100 short stories and your name is secretly Stephen King, then you probably have pages and pages and pages, and you could very reasonably do that. If your name is Stephen King, you should just have a publicist handle your press kit for you and not worry about this. But if they want to come take the seminar, that's cool. So let me catch up on... there's a question about pronouns. I would include pronouns in your bio. You could also put them in name pronunciation guide spaces if you really want to make sure that they get noticed. But generally, people know to look for pronouns at this point. Like, this is not something that you have to do a whole lot of education with to the same extent that you had to, say, 10 years ago. And so just including them, like even in the first line, so-and-so author, parentheses, pronouns, moving on. That's generally enough these days. If you want to reemphasize it again at the end, you potentially can. But remember that your bio is going to be written in the third person. So your pronouns are going to be how the bio is referring to you the whole time. And so depending on how you write your bio, you may not have to explicitly list pronouns in quite that formal way. They will be obvious because they are what's being used to refer to you in the course of the bio. Depending on your relationship with your pronouns, you may just decide that you don't want to use pronouns in your bio at all. And I have definitely read some bios that very clearly worked very hard to never refer to the individual by pronoun. That's totally fine. And if you don't have pronouns that you are comfortable sharing or that you want people to just use at any point, it's pretty clear when your bio is carefully constructed in order to avoid that. So that's something else that you can do. There's a question about IPA. There's all of the IPA symbols are standardized, and you can have standardized codes for them in there. Many of the symbols are letters that are just available on your keyboard, and then yes, there are codes. I am having a day. I've completely blanked. The keyboard codes that also back at Unicode. There we go. There are Unicode codes for all of the IPA symbols. Even before there were emojis that got them, the IPA symbols got them first. Let's see what else is in here. Oh, so here's a very good question about how to structure your press kit page. I would generally do it roughly how this seminar was organized. So I kind of worked my way down, kind of how the page might go. So having your headshot embedded next to your bio is potentially good. One thing to keep in mind is you potentially want multiple bios and multiple headshots up. So you might have, I would generally recommend, this is the exercise we're about to get into, 3 lengths of bio. The really short one, the medium length one, and the longer one. And the further you are in your career or the more things that you're covering, the longer one gets. You probably also want, not necessarily, like you may want multiple headshots that are just separate photos, like different takes of you. But you probably more likely want ones that are cropped a little bit differently, have different aspect ratios, have different resolutions, because different people are going to have different needs for context. So you're going to want a version that will look good in print, at print quality that's very high resolution. But you're also going to want one that will look good on Twitter and is cropped well for Twitter versus Instagram versus whatnot. And like how many social media platforms you care about will depend a lot on you and your medium, and again, the people that you are reaching. But go ahead and just put all of that up there and let them pick and choose. And so if I am as a person who's putting things together, it's like, I know I need about a 500-word blurb and a photo that will fit next to it. And it's on your website as your press kit. It's also very handy if you just put a line at the top of the press kit being like, feel free to use this when talking about me. Then I know I can grab the one that I want. And that's something that is a little bit easier for me than if I go, oh, you've got this 1,200-word bio up. I only have room for 500 words. Do I just lop off the last 2 paragraphs? If you're super savvy that you've written your bio so that if I just lop off the last 2 paragraphs, it's fine. But I, as a person who's organizing the event, don't know whether you are the kind of savvy person who organized your bio that way. And so that's a moment of stress for me. And so it's really easy if you just have your 3 versions explicitly laid out. And then I know this version is one that is approved by the person who I am working with, and I'm not stepping on toes while I'm rushing to make deadline or whatever it is. So that. It's also potentially handy to kind of have all of this as a series of files that are just in a folder that are zipped up and ready for you to email off, or that are in like a Google Drive folder or a Dropbox folder where you can share the link to it, especially if you have a lot of high resolution photos, because then you can just hand that off to people and they can go ahead and pull it, and they don't have to go to your website, download everything. It's right there in their inbox where they're probably organizing everything anyway. So I do recommend having at least a version of your press kit posted on your website, but it's not a bad idea to have maybe something that is a little bit fuller. And that might be where you put contact information that you don't want any rando on the internet to get. Though keep in mind, press kits, there's not an expectation of confidentiality around them. That's why they're a press kit. So things that you put in your press kit, you should expect people to share. You don't get to put it in your press kit and then be mad that people share it. That's different if you're like doing a press release that's embargoed until X date, but like, if you're putting contact information on a press kit, sort of assume that the entire world is going to have it, even if you're not posting it on your website, to kind of add a little bit of a filter. Are we ready for exercise? It's a sedentary exercise, so don't break out your heart monitor yet. I warned you about the jokes, they're bad. All right. If you come up with other questions, it is, of course, totally fine to ask them as the moment strikes. I think something popped up. You do not need to turn on your camera for the exercise. You don't have to turn on your camera at all, unless you have a kitten, in which case I demand that you turn on your camera and show me your kitten, but you can get out of that demand by not telling me about it. Hello, kitten. No, this is kind of a working on your own exercise. So what we are going to do is have you get started on making a bio. So it's just going to be 20 minutes. And what I want you to do is start working on roughing out. You're not going to have a final version probably in 20 minutes. Power to you if you do. But I'd like you to start roughing out bios at these lengths. And depending on how you work, you may want to just start with the 1,200-word bio and then trim it down. Or you might be somebody who's like, I think I can squeeze out 200 words and maybe I will stare at it a lot and try to make it grow. And so this is just focused time, kind of get outlines for that, an idea of what goes into each of them. And then we'll come back after the 20 minutes and talk a little bit about, did you pull it off? Are you the hero who got all 3 done? Or where did you get stuck? Or kind of where are you hung up on? If you're kind of new to stuff and you don't have a lot of publication credits to talk about or anything like that, 1,200 words may not be a bio length that you have. And that's fine. You might have the 200 word and the 500 word thing. That's totally okay. Again, don't just make things up or feel like you're obligated to have the longer version. The other thing to keep in mind is these are targets. They are not rules. So this is not like submission guidelines where you have to hit it, and if you don't, you're a bad person who didn't read the submission guidelines and submit it anyway. These are just kind of like targets. So like plus or minus 50 words for the longer lengths, plus or minus even hundreds of words is all right. This is more a concept of the bucket size that you are in than a rigorous, you got to do it this way, and your school teacher's coming for you if you don't. Yeah, flash writers, this is going to be a little bit of an excruciating exercise for you, because not only do you have to go over flash length, you have to go over flash length talking about you. So one of my dearest friends is a flash writer, and I have definitely gotten some sadistic joy out of forcing her into doing bios. So be prepared. The cuckoo timer has done its charming beep at me, which means your time is up. So to answer Gabby's question about whether winning a contest for your contests are kind of a fuzzy space in terms of whether they're kind of in the bio as a thing that you have achieved or in the accolades section. It really depends on the contest. So if you were published, or if your work was displayed as part of the contest, then it is something that you can definitely put in your bio because it was published, and so it would belong there like a published thing. If it's something where it was just, here you got a certificate, good job, or a trophy or whatever, that's a little bit less so, because that's more just a pat on the head kind of thing versus a publication credit, and so that would be more of an accolade that you would put in that section. There aren't hard and fast rules, so if you're sort of squinting at it and you're like, no, I think this belongs in the other section, then go ahead and put it in the other section. Are there other questions? Are there sort of responses? Or is wailing and gnashing of teeth?
So I didn't know that having a 1200, or was it 1,200 words, or was it longer? Because there were like different lengths of bios.
Yeah, it was 1,200 is the one that I was kind of in the exercise assignments.
Yeah, I didn't know you could get that long. For what scenarios would that be used? Because I've only seen like the 200-ish level.
Yeah, so where I've seen longer bios crop up have been, generally you're a little bit further along in your career before anybody cares about you at 1,200 words length. So that shows up in program books when you're at an event and you're a featured guest. So if you ever go to a convention, the guests of honor often get very long bios in the program book. If you are the main at a signing, you might get longish bios. Like the bookstore may do a lengthy write-up about you. Putting a longish bio about you on your webpage for readers to find might be something that you want to do. So its use cases are somewhat narrow, but the nice thing about having the 1,200 word bio is that it might cover more aspects of your career than any of the shorter ones do, which might be more targeted. So if you kind of have that as your master bio, where it's like, this is all of my depths and facets as a human being, I am the whole onion here. And then you've got a couple 200 word bios that you've trimmed out of that. And so it's like, okay, well, this is the subset that is relevant to my horror fiction, and this is the subset that is relevant to my digital art or whatnot. And then it trims down from there. And so you've got you keep the 1,200 word bio kind of up to date, and then on the fly, when you need something that is shorter, you can pull it from there. Okay. So sometimes, even if you're like, well, nobody's going to ever care about me at 1,200 words length, it may be useful to have, just so that when they care about you at 500 words length, you have prepared 500 words.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely like the idea of having the, short, medium, long, just saying, choose the one you like. Pick a card.
It can be pretty handy. And we could honestly do like a 4-hour seminar just on writing your bio for ways to make your life easier. Because there are things you can do where you structure it, like you put the most critical information in the first paragraph. Mm-hmm. And, get more nuance as you go. And I have definitely seen people who are like, yeah, these are like this is the critical information paragraph, this is the secondary information paragraph, and then there are several paragraphs that are specific to different facets of my career or different phases of my career or different reasons you would care about me. And then there's the big punchy contact info paragraph. And then when I need to trim, I pick 4 of these paragraphs. And it may be 12 paragraphs total, but you're only ever going to use 4 of them. So.
Okay.
Are there other questions, wonderings?
I have another question, if that's okay.
I'm not seeing anything from anybody else, so go right ahead.
Okay. So in the Making a Bio PowerPoint, it has relatable, character revealing personal detail, and then going into like the critical pieces. Is it best to I don't know, I have it where it's kind of light and fluffy, and then it goes into like past works and then what I'm currently doing and how to reach out to me for last? Should it instead be like shorten the fluff, have this is what I'm currently working on and looking for, in the past I've done this? I don't know.
It depends on how much space you have to fill. And so frequently, even in a short bio, a sentence or a phrase of fluff is fine because it kind of eases people in and it gives them a little bit of why do they care about the important stuff. But also keep in mind that you can often integrate the two a little bit.
Yeah,
so
that's what I tried to do. You
can definitely give away things about you in how you talk about the important stuff. And so that's a thing that you can also look at as well. When you're earlier in your career, fluff is going to just be a survival mechanism that you're going to do. So definitely like my early bios, fairly early on, especially before I realized that it's not embarrassing to be like, I've done 10 careers and whatever. But, or where I'd be like, I don't know, who cares? I've got like 1 publication credit. It would be things like, here's my list of hobbies. And I've got a whole paragraph of hobbies, and now my bio doesn't look like I'm nobody. And so, I had like the whole list where it was like, eats, writes, drinks tea, plays board games, cooks, goes on long walks, the whole thing. It was my dating profile basically, except I don't date. So it was like, this is how I'm getting, as a millennial, this is how I'm participating in this part of my culture. And like, that was, I didn't have a lot that like I wanted to put in there. And so it was like, okay, well, here's who I am as a person, and you can throw a dart at it. And if it lands on something you like, cool, I'm a relatable person. I'm not a terribly relatable person. So, faking it is good.
I don't know, drinking tea, walking, those are nice things.
I came to tea drinking in my 20s after like, I just don't like anything. And I fell off a cliff real hard by accident. And it is honestly the best thing I have ever done for being like a socially functional person, because I hate sports and I get intense about things that other people don't want to be, the other people want to be superficial about or whatnot. And so it's the kind of thing where it's like, I don't small talk well because I don't like children. I don't have children. I don't want to hear about your children. So it was one of the, like, what am I going to talk about? And it's tea. So now like every conversation you have with me, it's about cats and tea, because I have figured out that people will talk to me about those things and I'm only a little weird. And before tea, it was just cats. And that's a whole, when all you have is cats, that says something different about you. So yeah, it varies. You can put some thought into kind of your branding in that way. The fact that I'm a grumpy misanthrope is part of my branding. One, because it takes the edge off anybody expecting me to have social grace or be nice. And then 2, because frequently it's funny and I get away with it. But so like that's a thing that I just make sure to drop in so that when I stick my foot in my mouth, it can be like, well, she warned me.
Yeah. Okay, and do you recommend putting like current stuff and then what I've done in the past, or like past work and here's what I'm doing now and how to contact?
I would generally start with the things you want people to be most excited about. So if you've got a thing coming up that you want to promo, make sure that goes first.
Okay.
If you just came off being a famous bestseller for something, maybe mention that first. And also then I'm doing that.
Ain't that the dream?
There's a, yeah. So it's kind of be savvy about what is the thing that's gonna, you're being a little manipulative here. What is the thing that will get the response that you want?
Right.
And do it that way. There's a question in the chat about, do you want to spell out your URL or do you want to just say, find me on my website? Make people's lives as easy as possible. Give them the link. Give them exactly, don't say find me on Twitter, find me on Twitter as your Twitter handle. If it's too much or they don't care, they can trim it, but don't make them go look for it. Like every little piece of thing they have to go Google is something that they just may not bother to do, not because they don't care, but because they're busy. Or they don't notice that it's missing. So as much as possible, like bulletproof and idiot proof and busyness proof and like pandemic can't function with time proof, all of your stuff. And then everybody who doesn't have to like go, oh shoot, that detail got missed, will thank you for it.
So I had a question while I was coming up with stuff. A lot of the stuff that I used to do, I don't do now because pandemic. And so I wanted to say,
the pandemic year is a grace year for everybody. If you're going to go back into it, and this was just it doesn't count. It's not real time.
Well, I kind of wanted to just add extra words by saying when she's not, like, when the world is not filled with plague and pestilence or something like that.
And for as long as you are committing to keeping your bio updated though, when you do that, and that's fine as long as you're actually going to keep your bio updated. 10 years from now, if your bio still says and the world is not filled with plague and pestilence, hopefully that's going to be really weird. And people are going to be like, has she not touched this thing in 10 years? I'm not willing to commit to saying it will be because I'm not stupid. But the whole world, honestly. So like everything. But yeah, so like when you're going to put something that's very in the moment specific, that's fine. And that can in fact be really effective and grabby, but you are committing to making sure you keep on top of that because it will get outdated and it will be clear that you haven't done it.
Yeah.
If you are like me, where you're, once every 3 years you go, oh, right, I should look like a professional. Then make sure it's something that in 3 years won't be too embarrassing to be like, oh, I've left this here.
So I've managed to expand my 94 words to 111. So I haven't even gotten to the smallest one yet. But I was wondering if when I expand into 1200, when I don't have any publications and I don't have much beyond I'm a writer and I do weird things like get trained in medieval swordsmanship and foster kittens, not at the same time, hopefully, but would you recommend going into stuff like part of my brand as Token Geek Girl is wanting to remove the Token Geek Girl? So like on my website, I talk about how I never saw girls in sci-fi movies that weren't all boobs as I was growing up, that kind of thing. Is that something to put in a bio you want to put in a press kit, or is that more of
that's the kind of thing that tends to show up in a 1200 word bio. And thank you for making the Puss in Boots reference that I wasn't willing to interrupt her in order to do, but like my need to do that has been sated, so you did me a favor there. So that's the kind of thing that you're typically going to see, and it might be helpful to you to go look up people who have longer bios and kind of see what gets included. Think of it this way. I keep referencing speaking engagements. I'm not kidding about that. That's a thing that if you play your cards right, you can start picking up. And if you are good at it and you like it, can actually be a fairly lucrative source of income. And so just take a look at it and be like, why would somebody hire me to give a talk? Well, because I have this passion about removing the token geek girl and all of this. And so give them a preview of that talk that they would want to hire you for, or that interview topic that they would want to have you on a podcast for. Like, why do people, when you don't have a lot of work to point at, why do people care about you when they can't see the work yet? And give them that idea and create opportunities in that way.
Part of the reason why I couldn't go over 94 words is because he likes the sound of a keyboard, and he really likes chasing after my pen.
I mean, pens are kind of the best. They're all in your hand and flicking. So we've got Candace sharing an example that's really good about some of the things that show up in longer bios and really let you connect with the person who's being talked about. Excuse me, the person who's being talked about. So we are at time, which is 5 o'clock for me, and I'm currently waging a war on time, so I don't care what time it is for you. But we are at 2 hours since the seminar began. And so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. If you have other questions or want to talk over other stuff, the Dream Foundry Discord is the place to go. And I will probably not be there a whole lot immediately today, but we'll be around and I'll get back to it later. So go ahead and swing on in. And otherwise, this recording will go up at some point in the next couple of weeks, and the link to the slides will be shared with that. Take care. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and have a nice time.